Meanwhile, refugees begin trickling into India. The widespread genocide resulting from Operation Searchlight leads to approximately 10 million people fleeing East Pakistan and taking refuge in the neighbouring Indian states of West Bengal, Bihar, Assam, Meghalaya and Tripura. India spends several crores a day on food, shelter and medical attention of the refugees.
Mr. John Stonehouse, wearing a suit, and Mr. Bruce Douglas Mann didn't have to look far for evidence of the suffering that turmoil in East Pakistan has created. These women, queuing patiently in a seemingly endless line for their family's one meal of the day, are just a few of nearly 300,000 refugees who've now fled across the border into India. Almost 100,000 are in camps like this one. The rest are waiting at the gate for admission or have found shelter with relatives. The Indian government is providing rice, 100 grams per adult a day, and paying for other food bought by the volunteers who are helping run the camps. Each refugee carries an identity and ration card which states the number of people in the family and the amount of food they're entitled to.
Here's your card. Hope you enjoy your meal.
The threat of some epidemic is real. Though new water supplies are being hastily provided, sanitation is primitive. These new arrivals are being inoculated against typhoid and cholera, as well as smallpox. The MPs were anxious to hear why the refugees had been forced to leave their homes and take refuge in India, their traditional enemy. This man related how his father, mother and brother had all been killed by soldiers of the West Pakistan Army in Jekagacha, a village only 13 miles away. Most of the people in the camp were women and children. One young mother told Mr. Stonehouse how her husband, who worked in an army cantonment as a clerk, was simply lined up with 24 other men and shot by the soldiers. She herself, though pregnant, was beaten unconscious with the butt of a rifle. Like some 30% of the refugees, this woman was a Muslim, evidence that the bond of a common religion has not meant as much to the Punjabi soldiers as their hatred of the Bengalis. The two camps the MPs saw were trying hard to cope, but when the monsoon rains begin in a month's time, conditions are likely to deteriorate. International aid will be welcome to help care for people who cannot be moved far from the border, hoping as they must to return to their homes before long. At Mamavagina camp, opened just that day to cope with the new wave of refugees, I asked the two MPs about their impressions of what they'd seen and heard. Mr. Douglas Mann, from the stories you've heard today of the killing across the border, how do you assess it?
Well, I can't assess the scale of it, but it is certainly very serious. We've spoken to many people from many different villages who have confirmed the stories that have already appeared in the British press. They're both Hindus and Muslims. The stories of troops coming into the village, sometimes of burnings of the entire village, sometimes calling out those who have been associated with the Awami League. And sometimes the atrocities have also been committed, we are told, by Bihari Muslims. But they're directed against Bengalis, both Hindus and Muslims.
Well, this has gone beyond an internal sovereign affair, because it's quite clear that neither the Pakistan Army nor the new Bangladesh administration can cope. And with a major problem of this description, the international community must move to do something. It's not good enough to wash our hands of this responsibility and say that we do not interfere in the affairs of a sovereign state.
The two MPs ended their day by visiting the border itself. The road was crowded with ox carts and refugee families making their way on foot. At the river crossing at Boira, the MPs could look across into East Pakistan. Mr. Stonehouse is primarily concerned to deal with the widespread hunger many observers foresee. Mr. Douglas Mann and his committee are fighting for a ceasefire and political justice for the Bengalis. Those aims are equally important, but at present just as equally far from fulfillment. Richard Lindy, News at 10, Bongan. This ferry crossing over the river Bairab is just 5 miles further into Bangladesh than where the new government was formally declared on Saturday. Yet just 24 hours later, The sound of bombing and gunfire is sending a new wave of refugees wading through the water. Panic-stricken as they are, many prefer their belongings to be soaked rather than wait for the pontoon ferry itself. Just how close to the border is the West Pakistani Army prepared to come? Will it defy the Indo-Pakistan agreement, which calls on regular troops of both sides to come not closer than 5 kilometres from the frontier? Or will it, as many observers here think, not rest in its advance until it has completely sealed the frontier to prevent food and weapons, petrol and journalists from crossing over? Judging by the situation here at Bidyahapur, only a few miles from the border itself, it won't be very long before the first round in this war has been won decisively by the West Pakistani Army. Richard Lindley, News at 10, Bangladesh.
प्रेरणा दी बांग्लादेश के लोगों को कि इस हिम्मत से उन्होंने लड़ा और आज वो स्वतंत्र हैं और उन्हीं आदर्शों पर लड़ा जो हमारे देश को प्रेरणा देते आए हैं। हमने यहाँ भारत में भी 3 वादे किए थे अपनी जनता से। पहले ये कि जो शरणार्थी यहाँ आए हैं वो सब वापस जाएंगे। दूसरा ये कि हम हर तरह से मुक्ति वाहिनी की सहायता करेंगे, बांग्लादेश के लोगों की मदद करेंगे और तीसरे कि शेख साहब को हम जरूर छुड़वाएंगे जेल से।
ভারতবর্ষের জনসাধারণের কাছে কৃতজ্ঞ। আর যেভাবে 1 কোটি লোকের খাওয়ার বন্দোবস্ত এবং ঢাকার বন্দোবস্ত আপনারা করেছেন, আমি জানি ভারতবর্ষের মানুষও দুঃখী আছে, সেখানে তারাও কষ্ট পাচ্ছে, তাদেরও অভাবিত আছে। তা থাকতেও তারা সর্বস্ব দিয়েছে আমার লোককে সাহায্য করার জন্য। চিরদিন আমরা তা ভুলতে পারবো না।